There are a lot of cases where we make a commit, but then we realize that we made a mistake. Perhaps we left a typo or we accidentally included a file in our commit. In these situations, we don't really need to make another commit. We can amend or modify the last commit. Let me show you. So let's echo cafes to map.txt. Now let's make a commit and say render cafes on the map. Good. Now let's say we made a mistake and we should have echoed blue cafes on map.txt. So let's open map.txt and make the required changes. Blue cafes. Good. Now back in the terminal, first we need to stage the changes. So git add period. Good. Now to amend the last commit, we type git commit -- amend. We can supply a new message, or we can just enter and accept the previous message. I'm happy with the message, so let's close this. Back in the terminal, our last commit is amended. Just remember, we didn't really modify the last commit because, as I told you before, commits in Git are immutable. So even though on the surface we amended the last commit, Git actually created a new commit, okay? Now, let's look at the history. So here's our last commit. Let's look at the content of this commit. So git show head. Take a look. Now we have blue cafes. Now, as another example, let's say we forgot to include a file in the last commit. How can we do that? The exact same way. So I'm going to echo hello to file1.txt. Now let's stage the changes and amend the last commit. We're going to accept the same message. So let's move on. Now, let's look at the history one more time. Here's our last commit. We didn't add an additional commit. Let's look at the content of the last commit. So here we have two changes. We introduced a new file, file1.txt, with this content, and we added this new line to map.txt. Perfect. Now, let's say we accidentally included file1.txt in the last commit. How can we remove it? Well, earlier we talked about resetting the head. I talked about 3 different options: soft, mixed, and hard. I told you that if we use the mixed option, Git is going to unstage our changes, but all of our changes are going to stay in our working directory. So I'm going to reset the head using the mixed option to head ~1. Now our working directory is dirty. So let's run a short status. We have 2 changes. We have some modifications to map.txt and a new untracked file. Let's say we don't need file 1, so we can run git clean fd. We talked about this earlier in the course. With this, we can remove untracked files from our working directory. All right, so file 1 is gone. We are left with the changes in map.txt. So let's stage the changes and then make a commit. Now here, I'm not going to use the amend option because we've removed the last commit by resetting the head pointer. So here we should create a new commit and say render cafes on the map. So this is how we can amend the last commit. But how can we amend an earlier commit? We'll talk about that next.